this thing that's working at the inside of the envelopes.
All right, we went through. Actually, we've touched all three domains. Domain one with the old, weird, alien, toxic bacteria. The ones that still live in places that look like the early Earth, because the early Earth was this like crazy hellscape of like sulfur and cyanide and volcanic activity. So those guys, which have taught us a lot about the early Earth. Then normal bacteria, like the ones that make you sick. We call them eubacteria. We'll learn much more about them in our next unit. And then the first kingdom of the eukaryotes, which is the protists, the ones that kind of don't fit in any of the other three. They're not quite fungi, not quite plants, or not quite animals. Real oddball kind of thrown together kingdom that most taxonomists hate and wish we could do differently. Good?
Yeah.
On to the more familiar stuff. Maybe the least familiar of the three, though, fungi. And again, I gave you a little more with the bacteria and the protists because they're very unfamiliar. But with these three, there's a lot there that we're not going to touch. We're really just going to talk about how you recognize them as what they are. Number one about fungi, they don't make their own food, which is weird because in other aspects, they're kind of like plants, aren't they? They grow instead of being born. They don't get to move around because they can have cell walls. So they don't make their own food. How do they make food? They're heterotrophic. What do most of them do? A lot of them are decomposers. Not all, but a lot of them are decomposers. It's one of the ways to be effective if you can't walk around to get food. Just grow on something that just died, and you're probably good for a while. And for most of them, that's enough time to reproduce and make more. Multicellular in almost every case. There's a couple exceptions. One of them being yeast. A lot of people don't think of yeast as a fungus, but it certainly is. Very useful one. They have a cell wall, and the cell wall is made of chitin. That's how you say that. Chitin. It's a complex carbohydrate, whereas plant cells are made of cellulose. And so some examples would be mushrooms, molds, fungi, or yeast. If you've ever seen shelf fungus on a tree, those kind of shelf-looking things, that's another category. Yep.
So I'm wondering, like the mushroom thing?
The mushroom thing.
Yeah, mushrooms.
Yeah.
Are the ones you take. Why do they do what they do?
Why do the mushrooms do what they do? So
because they're like poisonous, but poison doesn't.
I think what Brady's asking is what is the point of the actual mushroom itself?
Yeah.
And the point is reproduction. They are the fruiting body of the fungus. Most of the time, the fungus that we're talking about that's putting up a mushroom exists underground and is much bigger than that mushroom. So kind of think of the fungus or the mushroom as the flower almost. It's producing spores. Yeah. Good question. Anybody know these guys?
Yeah.
You know, that's a morel mushroom. And it's one of and there's quite a few mushrooms like this, but it's the one you can find around here. That they grow in a very short period of the year. We're right about there. It's about the last 2 weeks in April that morels grow. Nobody really knows how to farm them, so you can only find them wild, and thus they are incredibly valuable. Find a bunch of morels and you can sell them for quite a lot. Like street drug prices. Like crazy how much you can get. Yeah. So, but they're also delicious. If you saute them in butter with a little bit of dredging and flour, they're incredible. So, if you ever get the chance, give them a shot. So, but like that's what I mean by we're just dipping into how you recognize it. A fungus is a heterotrophic, multicellular organism with a cell wall. That's the general idea. That's how you recognize them. As opposed to plants, Well, okay, what are we looking at? Heterotroph or autotroph? Autotroph, because they make their own food. Unicellular or multicellular? Multicellular. They move around. You don't see plants walking around, so non-motile. So really, again, a lot like fungi. They have a cell wall. Cell wall is made of something different, cellulose. They also have those special organelles that only they have, called chloroplasts, that do the photosynthesis. And that's what differentiates them from fungi, the chloroplasts, the photosynthesis they do to be autotrophs. Tons of diversity, although most of us, when we think plants, we think flowering plants, but in fact, not all plants are flowering plants. What do you call them? Conifers, right? Gymnosperms, like they don't have flowers, they have cones instead, right? So that's a whole different category of plants, and there's others as well. Last but not least, the one we're in, animals. Autotrophs or heterotrophs? Yeah, because we have to eat food. That's what a heterotroph is. It needs other organisms for its energy. Unicellular or multicellular? Multi, that's part of the definition. Mostly motile or non-motile? Mostly motile. There's exceptions. Sponges, sea anemones. Cell walls or no? Boys. No. That's why we can be motile, right? As you get that flexibility. It's a trade-off. Less protection, more movement. So obviously not a deep dive into each of these. You just got to know how to differentiate them. If I say multicellular, you're thinking fungi, plants, or animals. Then we narrow it down, right? Is it heterotrophic? Well, then that means it's an animal or a fungus. Can it move? Oops, I think we're on animal. That kind of thing. That's what you're going to have to do on a test. Questions? Short lesson today because you got something to learn. You got a skill to learn. Yeah. If you were out in the woods and you wanted to make sure you could identify a bird, what would you bring?
A book.
You bring a bird book, right? A field guide. That's what normal people do. That's not what scientists do. When scientists want to be 100% sure that they're identifying something correctly, they use what's called a dichotomous key. It is a printed tool, usually with pictures, but doesn't have to have pictures. It reminds me a lot of, did you ever read the Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Yeah.
Yeah, Brady's like, I still read those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because what it is a series of choices between two options. And whatever you choose, it says, okay, if you're choosing A, go to number 3. If you're choosing B, go to number 15. And basically, you keep doing that by looking at the animal or plant or whatever you're identifying. You keep choosing until it dead ends into, hey, this is this species, or this family, or this order. It's different kinds. Generally, they are more effective if you want to be really sure of yourself than a field guide. And that's all I have to say about that, because really anything else you're just going to need to learn by doing it. So let's identify some sharks. I got a page of sharks for you. And you're going to identify each and every one of them, not down to the species level, that would take a little longer, but down to the family level, right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family. What family of sharks each of these belongs to. So let me pass out the key and we'll talk about how to use it. So it's the sharks you're identifying on one side and the key you use to identify them on the other side, along with a helpful shark diagram. Because some of these items are going to be talking about shark parts you've never heard of. So like when you get to the one that says anal fin, what? Anal fin? You look at the picture and you look at all the fins and you look for the one that says anal fin. Oh yeah, that's the one that's furthest in the back, get it? Yeah, there you go. So use the shark diagram, use the series of choices between two things. Here's the rule, because you're going to be tempted. When you get to some of the weirder looking sharks, you're going to be tempted to just kind of go down the line and look for the one that sounds like it's that one and just go, oh, yep, that's the one. Don't do that. Dichotomous keys, you've got to start at number one every time. You're going to start at the top of this key for shark number one. And then for shark number two, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to start at the top and go through. Some of them will take barely any time at all, skip you right to the end, and there you are. And some of them, you'll go through almost the whole thing. Okay, but keep yourself honest and go from number one every time, and you will not go wrong. One thing I want to make sure you understand. Where is my marker? There is one that says mouth. Where is it? Mouth at front of head rather than back. And then there's one that says mouth back along underside of head. Here's the difference, right? This is mouth back along underside of head. That's mouth in the front. Get it? Okay. Good luck. Let me know if you have questions.